Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about ancient Mesopotamia facts. It's chapter 3. So let's start by getting our Cornell notes out. Let's go to the top of our paper and write ancient Mesopotamia facts. Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is going to be important. Make sure you get that up there. Let me spell Mesopotamia for you. Mesopotamia. Hopefully you got that. Facts, because I'm moving on. All right. On the right side of your Cornell notes, you're going to start taking your notes. Remember, you don't have to write all the words, just the key information. So, what you need to know about Mesopotamia is most people believe it was the world's first civilization. So we call it the cradle of civilization. Cradle, yes, like a baby. The beginning of civilization was right there. It lasted from 3500 BC to 1900 BC, and it also is called land between two rivers. Okay, about 10 more seconds to get these notes down. Okay, so we're going to be talking about those two rivers. They were called the Euphrates and the Tigris River. So as you can see from this aerial view, this is a river, and what happens when the river floods in the spring is that all that land near it gets very moist, and it makes for good farmland. So spring rains made the rivers flood, and in Mesopotamia they grew wheat and barley. Let me give you about 30 seconds to write those two things down. Okay, students, so the next one is they created irrigation systems. Well, irrigation is a big word. What does that mean? Let's go ahead and look on there.
When my ancestors first started farming here, their biggest problem was never knowing when a flood might come and wash away their crops. Even if the crops survived that, they might die in the summer when it's so hot and there's not enough water. But my people didn't give up. Instead, we actually invented a way to control the river. First, we learned how to build levees. Those are big piles of earth between the fields and the river. They're too tall for the river to get over, so they prevent the floods. Then we made gated ditches around the fields, and when the crops needed water in the summer, we would just open the gates and let some river water flow in. To plant our crops, we use a great tool called a plow. It's a Sumerian invention, and we use an ox to pull the plow, another of our great ideas.
Okay, let's go ahead and go back to our presentation. So now you know what an irrigation system is and how they created it. And they also built city-states. So think of it as a city that's like a state because they have their own rules. And take about 10 more seconds to get those last two ideas down. Okay, so let's talk about organization in Mesopotamia. So we know they grew enough food to have a surplus, which is more than what they needed. They had riverboats that moved those supplies like wheat and pottery, things that they traded, and they developed the wheel and the sail, two of their best inventions. So you have the wheel up here, picture of a sailboat down here, and of course they had to keep good records of these trades, so they had a writing system that they used. You can see these guys over here. That's part of Sumerian or Mesopotamian art. So let's talk about what we're going to write on our notes. So, let's go back. Oh, sorry everybody, I'm in the wrong mode. Nope, let's go back. Here we go. Okay, so enough food to have a surplus, that's one. They had riverboats that moved and supplies, and they traded. Also, don't forget to write the wheel and the sail as their inventions, and that lastly, they kept good records of their trades. Okay, about 10 more seconds to get those ideas down. Okay, and we're just about finished here, so let's go ahead and go on to our next slide. We're going to get a lot more into this guy Hammurabi, very important person in history, and again, we'll get more into him, but for now I just want you to know he's from Mesopotamia, he was a very important king, and that he's most known for making very strict laws. Okay, moving on to the next slide in about 10 seconds. All right, so what did they eat? They ate barley cakes. I did my best to find you a picture of barley cakes, flatbread, and they hunted for small animals near the rivers. So again, next chunk of information, barley cakes, flatbread, hunted near the rivers for their food. Okay, moving on. All right, so they were religious, or at least they had shared values about the afterlife. They built these beautiful ziggurats, or temples, and in their language, ziggurat meant mountain of God, or hill of heaven. So take 30 seconds to write that down. So what you're going to notice that when you look at the shape of it, it's a pyramid. And last bit of information you need to know about the ziggurats is they were built in the center of the city-state to honor the god. So each city-state had its own god, and they built the ziggurat in the center of the city-state to honor that god. Okay, ready to move on? Just about 10 seconds. Okay, this one won't be on your test, but I thought it was cute and you should know about it. The clothing of the Mesopotamians. The men wore skirt-looking clothes. Imagine the men's skirt, no shirt. Of course, it was warm where they lived. The women wore gowns, and their right arm and shoulder would be covered. They would braid their hair. The women would braid their hair. They wore these fancy headdresses on special occasions. And the men wore gold and silver jewelry. Both the men and women wore gold and silver jewelry. How about if I give you about 40 seconds to write down the important information there? Okay, about 5 more seconds. Okay, so what were the Mesopotamian achievements? The wheel, we talked about that earlier. The plow, which that picture is right over here. It had a carved blade on the bottom, and it would dig into the ground, and it would lift up the ground so then they could then put the seeds down. You had the sailboat. We showed you that earlier. The irrigation system, we showed you that earlier. This is new. They actually had sewers and flush toilets. They had the first writing system. It was called cuneiform. Hammurabi introduced the first law codes. And early numbers, algebra, and measurements were used in trade. So how about if I give you 45 seconds to write down the Mesopotamian achievements? So as you're looking at this, just a quick review, this is their cuneiform. It translates wedge. If you were to translate that, that means wedge-shaped writing, because it's very, they would dig into it, into this wet clay, and then let it dry and come up with their writing. You have the ancient wheel over here. It looks very different than today's wheel. Some art showing the sail and the man in the sailboat. You have the ox. Two ox means two oxen, and they are attached to the plow. And you have their irrigation system that helped keep the soil with the right amount of water. Okay, 10 more seconds. Okay, their houses, as you can see, at first they lived in huts. This is a hut right here. First they lived in huts, and then later they built houses out of mud, and that mud was made into bricks and dried out in the hot sun. The one-story houses were the poorer people, and then the two-story houses had the rich people living in them. So it started with huts. One-story houses were the poorer people. Two-story houses were the richer people. And they would take that mud, carve it into rectangular bricks, and then they would stack those bricks after they dried out to make the house. As you can see from this picture, people walked along the roofs from house to house very often. Sometimes they would sleep out on the roofs on hot nights. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Okay, last, cuneiform. We were just talking about that. We're going to do something with this later. I'm going to give you some clay, and you're going to write your name in cuneiform. We'll get back to that so you can see it. There it is, right over there. I'm going to move this over so you can see all of it. So let's see, I am farmer, so I would be that symbol, followed by that symbol. Where's the R? The R is right there. And then the M is this one. And then the E is this. And then R again back over here. That's how I would spell my name if I were to carve it into wet clay in cuneiform. And that is our presentation today on Mesopotamia.